This recording was submitted anonymously to our department. No return address, no fingerprints. The audio appears unedited. The voice belongs to a male adult. Identity still unknown. Based on the content, this is being treated as a voluntary confession. The following transcript is a direct translation.
He looked so small, lying there. The room was dark, except for that static blue glow. You know the kind. When the TV loses signal and it just hums, softly, like it's remembering something. That hum filled everything. It covered the walls, the floor, my skin. He was there, like always, sunken into the couch. His face half lit, slack, useless. I didn't speak. I didn't even breathe loud. Just stood there, arms by my side, watching him fade into that noise. He didn't twitch, didn't roll over, just stayed. Mouth slightly open, chest rising, falling. The kind of breathing that almost disappears if you look too close. I counted each breath. I tried to imagine what it would look like if they stopped. The remote was on the floor. The rug was stained with something old. Maybe wine, maybe blood. I didn't care. The glow from the TV made his face look, I don't know, emptied. Like whatever used to live in him had packed up and left. But I knew it hadn't. I knew he was still in there. And that's what made it unbearable. I thought, if there was ever a moment, this would be it. That blue hum, that frozen room, him asleep like some useless piece of furniture. It felt like time paused, like even the air held its breath for me. But I didn't move. Not yet. One arm dangled off the edge, loose, lifeless, the way you'd drop a towel or an old coat. I took a step closer, slow, real slow. Not because I was scared, I just didn't want the floor to creak. I leaned in, just enough to see his hand, fingers curled inward, barely, pale, still. That arm had done things. To me, to walls, to my mother. That hand had broken plates, doors, promises. And now it just, hung there. Not a weapon anymore, not anything. Just weight and flesh. And for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt taller, stronger. I didn't touch him. I wanted to, just to feel how empty he'd become. But I didn't. Because if I touched him, maybe the spell would break. Maybe he'd stir. Maybe he'd say my name, the way he used to like it was dirt. I couldn't risk that. Not while I had the upper hand. Not when he was so, Still, I stared at that arm for a long time. It reminded me of all the times I wished I could make it stop moving. And now it had stopped. Completely. That alone felt like a kind of power. Like holding lightning in a bottle. For a second, I knew it then. This was it. He would never be this fragile again. Never this quiet. Never this unguarded. If I didn't do it now, I'd carry that weight forever. I'd look back and hate myself for letting the chance slip. It was the first time I'd seen him from above. Not just physically, I mean, in every way. Like I had finally risen to a place where I could look down on him. Like I'd taken back something I didn't even know was missing. His body was half off the couch. His legs splayed open. His mouth catching flies. He wasn't a monster anymore. Just a thing. A dying fire. A carcass of power. And something in me said, softly but clearly now, I didn't move. Not yet. Because I wanted to hold on to that moment a little longer. That perfect, still second. Before anything changed. Before the line was crossed. But I knew it with everything in me. He'd never look this weak again. Never. I didn't even need to check. I knew it would be there. It always was. That old cabinet on the balcony. Metal hinges rusted. Doors that screamed when you opened them. He kept all his junk in there, things he never used. Things that smelled like oil and dust and time. But the hammer, the hammer was different. It sat in the same spot. Like it was waiting for something, for someone. Nestled between a cracked screwdriver and a box of bent nails. I opened the cabinet slowly. Not because I was nervous. Just, I wanted to be sure that it was real. That I was really doing this. I reached in. The handle was still rough from the last time he used it. Maybe years ago. Maybe yesterday. It was hard to tell with him. He never cleaned it. Said the dirt gave it character. That kind of thing always stuck with me. How he could make anything ugly sound like it mattered. The cabinet smelled like mold and cigarette ash. Like the parts of him that lingered in every corner of the house. I didn't hold my breath. I wanted to breathe it in. I wanted to know exactly what it felt like to touch the beginning of the end. It's strange what you notice. The way wood absorbs things. Skin, sweat, time. That handle had his grip worn into it. You could almost feel the shape of his fingers. Even now, it was like he left pieces of himself in everything he touched. And this thing, this toolit, was full of him. I brought it close to my face, like I was checking for cracks, for rot. But really, I was testing something. A memory, maybe. Seeing if the scent would pull anything out of me. And it did. It brought back the shed. The noise. The way he slammed things around when he was angry. The way he'd hold that hammer without saying a word. And I'd just, disappear. It wasn't just a hammer. Not to me. It was a symbol of power, of silence, of how small I used to feel when he held it. But now, it was in my hands. And he was asleep. And that balance was different. That smell didn't scare me anymore. It made me feel, certain. I gripped it tighter. Let the weight settle in. It wasn't heavy, but it wasn't light either. It was just enough. Enough to do what needed doing. I could almost hear him behind me, telling me I was holding it wrong. But he wasn't behind me. He was snoring on the couch. And I was holding the hammer right. My hand closed around it without hesitation. Like muscle memory. Like it was a part of something older than me. Something passed down. I didn't feel like I was making a decision. It felt like I was completing one. Finishing what had been started long before. There was no ceremony. No special moment. I just picked it up. Turned it over once. Felt the weight shift in my hand. That was it. No sound. No thunder. Just me and this old object. Familiar. I had seen it hanging there since I was a kid. Always in reach. Always ignored. It felt, clean. Not morally. Just clean. Simple. Like a line being drawn. Like the kind of action that doesn't ask for applause. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt prepared. Like someone performing the same steps they've done 100 times before. A ritual without faith, but with meaning. I looked back at the door to the living room. It was slightly open. I could hear the TV hum still going. I stood there with the hammer, not thinking about what would come after. Just listening, holding, breathing, repeating. I held it steady, both hands wrapped around the handle. One near the bottom, one closer to the head. Like I'd seen in those shows he used to watch men building, breaking, fixing. The hammer felt heavier this way. More real. More final. I tried to imagine it. Not in some dramatic slow-motion way. Just, practically. Logically. How much force would it take? That's what I kept asking myself. How hard would I need to swing? How high should I raise my arms? Where would I aim? I wasn't thinking in rage. There was no fire in me. Just calculation. Geometry. Biology. Physics. I imagined the arc. The downward movement. The sound it might make. Not the scream. I wasn't expecting one. He slept like a corpse. I thought about the resistance. The point where bone stops giving. Where it cracks. Splits. I didn't flinch. These weren't fantasies. They were steps. Preparation. I think a part of me wanted it to feel impossible. Heavy, maybe. But it didn't. It felt manageable. I could do it. That scared me more than anything, that it felt so doable. Like something I was built to do. Not out of hate, but out of something colder. Something older. The house was mostly dark, but the hallway light was still on. Just a weak bulb above the bathroom door, casting a soft, yellow glow. When I turned the hammer slightly, the metal head caught that light. It shimmered for a second. Not bright. Just enough to remind me it was real. I watched the way the light moved across it. A slow gleam. It looked clean. Cleaner than I expected. No rust. No stains. It felt strange that something that had lived so long in that filthy cabinet could shine like that. I kept turning it. Slowly. Watching the reflection bend and stretch. The light made the hammer look almost ceremonial. Like something sacred. A relic. It didn't belong to me. Not yet. But it would. I could feel it. That reflection wasn't just light. It was a promise. Of change. Of quiet. Of a life without him in it. And for a second, I saw myself in the metal. A warped version of me. Stretched by the curve of the head. I looked unfamiliar. Hollow-eyed still. I didn't look like a son. I didn't look like a boy. I looked like a fact. Something happening. It surprised me the way it thudded. Deep. Fast. Like a drum in my throat. Not fear. Not excitement. Something in between. Like the moments before you get hit. That strange alertness. The one that makes your skin buzz. I hadn't felt it in years. Not since I was small. It brought me back. 2 nights when I'd hear the floorboards shift, his footsteps coming down the hall. That awful rhythm. Slow, heavy. My heart would race just like this. Back then, I'd hide under the blankets, as if cotton could stop pain, as if silence could protect me. This time, there were no blankets, no covers, just me, the hammer, and that heartbeat. A part of me thought maybe this was wrong, that maybe this was what he felt, too, right before he raised his voice, his hand, his belt. Maybe his heart raced too. I stood there, hammer in hand, heart pounding like it did back then, and I realized I wasn't scared of him anymore. I was scared of me, of what I could do, of how steady my hands felt, how natural the grip was. That pulse wasn't warning me to run. It was counting down. I had just shifted my weight, nothing loud, just enough to make the floor whisper. And then he stirred, a twitch in his leg, a shift in his chest. His head tilted slightly, like he was about to wake. I stopped breathing, froze in place. Everything in me turned still, like prey in tall grass. His eyelids fluttered. For a second, I thought they were about to open, that I'd see those eyes again, the ones that had looked through me my whole life. That cold, sharp stare. But they didn't open, they just twitched, then relaxed. Like his body had checked the world, and decided it could rest a little longer. I didn't move. Couldn't. It felt like the whole room had narrowed down to those 2 eyelids. My grip on the hammer tightened. If he opened his eyes, it would be over. Not because he'd stop me, but because the spell would break. The stillness, the purity of the moment. I needed him asleep. I needed him unaware. I watched his face carefully. The lines, the slight frown he always wore, even in sleep. I waited for another twitch, another sign, but nothing came. The storm passed. I was still in the eye. It was soft, barely there. A faint gargling breath, like something caught between a sigh and a snore. It came out of him with no intention, no effort, just noise, a human leak. It made my skin crawl. That sound used to mean I could relax, that he was down for the count, that I wouldn't be called, shouted at, dragged across the room. It used to bring relief, but now it brought disgust. Because even in his most vulnerable state, he polluted the air. I stared at his mouth as the sound came out, slightly open, lips cracked. It looked like a hole, like a warning, or a portal to something I never wanted to return to. And for the first time, I wished he would stop breathing. Not out of hate, not even out of anger, just out of mercy. For both of us, the snore faded, his lips closed, the silence returned. My hands were still steady, but my mind, it wavered, not from doubt, from memory. The kind you don't choose to remember, the kind that returns all on its own. There was a moment where I wondered, was this a sign? Some final hesitation from the world itself? A pause before a decision that couldn't be undone? I didn't believe in fate, not really. But in that second, it felt like something was whispering, not yet. Maybe it was fear, trying to disguise itself as logic. Or maybe it was guilt, crawling back into the room like smoke under a door. I don't know. But I felt something like an edge, sharp and invisible, pressing against my chest. Not stopping me, just reminding me that this would echo. I told myself it didn't matter, that he'd never remember this night, that whether he woke up or didn't, nothing would change what had already happened, what I'd already lived through, what I'd carried for years. Still I stood there, unmoving, breathing shallow, heart dragging against my ribs. I wanted him to move again. I wanted another sign, something clear, something loud, but nothing came. Just the quiet hum of the house, and the hammer cold in my hands. If it was a warning, I ignored it. It didn't take much to bring it back. Just the stillness, the quiet, the shape of the hallway behind me. And suddenly I was there again, smaller, colder, stuck in a different night. His voice came first, not loud, not cruel, just flat, dead, like saying my name was a chore. He never yelled it. He didn't need to. That tone was worse than shouting. It was hollow, final, like a door slamming inside your own chest. When he said my name, it wasn't a question, it was a verdict. I knew what came next. My body knew before my brain did. Sometimes he'd say it once, sometimes twice, never more. The silence between the words was the loudest part. That's when I'd freeze, when I'd stop breathing, when I'd wait for the sound, the one that came next, the one I heard now, not in the room, but inside me. And standing there with the hammer, That same dread filled my mouth again, like rust, like old pennies, like blood that's been swallowed and never spat out. My name still echoed somewhere in the walls, a sound without time, still alive. I used to count them, each step from the living room to my door. 6, always 6. I don't know if the hallway was really that short, or if my memory trimmed it, but that rhythm, it never changed. Step, step, pause, step, step, door. It's strange how the body remembers even when the mind tries to forget. That rhythm, slow, steady, confident, lives in my spine. Every time I hear footsteps now, I flinch a little, not visibly, just inside, like a reflex no one sees. Back then, I'd lie still in bed, hands gripping the sheets, eyes on the doorknob. I always watched the doorknob, that brass turn, slow, deliberate. He didn't slam, he never rushed. Everything he did was measured, controlled. That's what made it worse. And the hammer in my hand felt like the same rhythm, the same weight, like I was holding a memory, like I was holding him. His steps, his belt, his breaths into the wood, hidden in the metal, still moving through me. I never understood why it felt metallic, why the panic had a taste, but it did, every time, like biting a coin, like bleeding from the gums. That flavor, old sharp, dirty wood bloom in my mouth, before the first hit even landed. Fear isn't loud, not the kind I knew. It's quiet, cold, it creeps, it stains. You don't scream, you shrink, you vanish inside yourself. You fold down to the smallest version of your body, and you wait, for the pain, for the silence after, for the next step. Even now, standing in the dark with that tool in my hand, the taste came back, my mouth dry, my tongue heavy. It made me angry, that something so invisible could live inside me for so long, that I could still taste him, even now, even after everything. I breathed through it, let it sit, didn't spit it out, because maybe that was the last part of him I needed to swallow. Maybe that taste was the last thread between then and now. And once it was gone, he'd finally be out of me, for good. I didn't plan to sit down. My legs just gave in, slowly, like they were tired of pretending. I lowered myself to the floor, back against the cold wall, hammer resting across my thighs. My fingers didn't let go. They just loosened, a little. For a while, I just stared ahead, not at him, not at anything, just into the dark. And I kept asking myself, is this already too late? Did I wait too long? Is it still self-defense, if the war ended years ago, and I never left the battlefield? The weight of the hammer felt different now, less like a weapon, more like a question. I kept running through all the reasons, the stories, the memories, each one stacked on top of the last like bricks. I tried to build a wall high enough to justify it, but all I built was silence. Maybe there's a line you cross without knowing. Maybe I crossed it the moment I opened that cabinet. Maybe the moment I stayed silent while he slept. Or maybe it was earlier, years ago, when I stopped believing he could ever change. Or when I realized I'd already changed without him. The house was so quiet, I could hear the seconds pass. That stupid kitchen clock, with its plastic frame and fake chrome hands. Tick, tick, tick. Each one sharp, measured, relentless. Like a countdown, except I didn't know what it was counting down to. I'd heard that clock my whole life. At breakfast, while he muttered through his newspaper. At night, while I cleaned the dishes and tried not to breathe too loud. The ticking had always been background noise. Now it was a metronome for my thoughts. Each tick felt like a reminder that time didn't care, that it would keep moving, no matter what I did, that whether I stood up or stayed on the floor forever, the clock would go on. It made everything feel smaller and heavier. I thought, maybe I'm just stalling. Maybe I sat down so I wouldn't have to decide. But the truth, I needed that stillness. I needed the sound of something consistent, something that wouldn't lie or raise a hand or disappear when it mattered. Out of nowhere, his body shifted. A dry cough rattled from his chest, soft and broken. It cut through the silence like a blade. Then he mumbled something, words I couldn't make out. Maybe a name, maybe nothing. I froze again, not out of fear this time, out of ... sadness or confusion. I watched his face twitch, then settle, like a machine trying to restart, then giving up. He didn't wake. He just ... existed, faded, like static on an old radio. Whatever he said, it wasn't for me. I knew that. Maybe it was someone from before me, or something he said in dreams when no one was watching. But it didn't matter, because it was the most human sound I'd heard from him in years, and it didn't change a thing. The hammer was still in my lap, my hands were still warm around it, and the clock kept ticking, and my knees ached from the cold floor, and he kept breathing, slowly, like the world still owed him air. I pushed myself off the floor slowly, using the wall behind me to stand. My legs were stiff, shaky, my feet tingled numb from how long I'd been sitting there. I had to stomp them lightly, just to feel something again. And when I looked up, he was right there. The space between us had shrunk, not physically maybe, but emotionally, psychologically. There was no more hallway, no more childhood, no more safe distance, just a few steps, and that couch, and him, the man, the shell, the source. All the years between us collapsed into that moment. Every mile I had tried to put between who I was and who he had made MIT vanished. It felt like we were two parts of the same frozen thing, like time had trapped us in amber, and now, finally, the amber cracked. I didn't feel closer to him, just, closer to the decision. That space I used to hide in between rage and action was gone. There was no buffer now, just the beat of my heart and the sound of his breath. There was a window behind the couch, a large one, covered in grime, half fogged by the night. But I saw myself in it anyway. The shape, the outline, the posture. At first, I didn't recognize it. The person standing there didn't look like a victim, or a child, or even a man, really. He looked like a stranger, someone carved out of silence, someone who had waited too long and come back wrong. I stepped closer to the glass, just enough to catch more of my face. The eyes didn't blink, the jaw didn't move. There was no expression, just ... intention, cold and quiet. It scared me, but not in the way I expected. It scared me because it felt right. I thought, if I don't do this, I don't know who I'll become. And if I do, ... maybe I'll become him. Or maybe I'll finally stop being anything at all. Just a fact, just an end. I took one step, just one, and the wood beneath my foot groaned like it was screaming, loud, sharp. It echoed down the hallway. I froze again, not out of fear, just instinct. That noise, the betrayal of the house, had felt like a voice saying, he knows. But he didn't move. He didn't flinch. He kept sleeping, mouth open, breath slow. The groan was just a groan, not a siren, not a curse. Just old wood, reacting to old weight. Mine. I thought about all the times I'd tried to avoid that exact sound. As a kid, trying not to wake him, trying not to be noticed. And now I had made it louder than ever. On purpose. Maybe it was my body's way of saying, I'm not hiding anymore. I took another step, and another, each one steady. The hammer still in my hand, my feet still half numb. But I didn't care. The floor could scream all it wanted. I wasn't the one who had to be quiet anymore. I stopped right behind him, close enough to feel the heat from his body, faint as it was. The hammer hung low in my hand, like it was resting too. I didn't raise it. Not yet. I just stood there, listening, waiting. I thought maybe he'd speak again, say something in his sleep. Maybe a name. Maybe a word I never heard him say when he was awake, like sorry. Or anything that sounded like it meant something. But there was nothing. Just the low rhythm of breath. I told myself I wasn't stalling, that this pause wasn't hesitation. But maybe it was. Maybe some quiet part of me wanted a sign, not a warning. Just a signal. Something human. Something final. Some sound to seal it all. But the only sound was the house. The air felt thick, heavy with everything I hadn't said. Every memory, every bruise, every quiet scream that never left my throat. I was standing behind all of it now. I wasn't in the house anymore. I was in the past, the center of it. Then he did it. He took in this long, slow breath, like he was sinking deeper into sleep, like he was finally letting go of something. His chest rose, held, fell, no twitch, no sound, just ... peace. It made me furious. Not loud, fire-breathing fury, just this cold, bitter spike in my stomach. He didn't deserve peace. He hadn't earned it. He'd taken mine every night for years, crushed it under his boots, flushed it out with whiskey and silence. And now he was just ... resting. That breath had felt like an insult, like the universe had tucked him in one last time, while I stood behind him with every scar he gave me, still bleeding on the inside. He looked like a man at the end of a long day, not a monster, not a ghost, just a man. And that was the worst part. Still, I didn't move. That breath stuck in my head, playing over and over. I wondered if he even knew he'd done it. If peace was something that happened to people like him by accident. And if it did, could I take it back? My eyes burned, from the dust, from the light, from everything. So I shut them tight. Not to block him out, but to block out the rest. The room, the years, the voices. Just for 1 second, I needed to be inside myself again. My hand lifted, not fast, not dramatic, just upward, elbow bending, wrist firm. The hammer didn't shake. I didn't picture his face. I didn't relive anything. I wasn't doing this out of memory. I was doing it because there was nothing else left to do. Eyes closed, breath held, heart quiet. I thought, this is the end of the waiting. That's all it is. Not revenge, not justice. Just the end of the pause between things. Between pain and silence. Between silence and something else. I raised my arm, and I stayed there for a moment, still listening one last time. Not for him. For me. For the version of me that had waited. For the part of me that still wanted to run. But no one came. No one screamed. Nothing changed. And I knew why I was already gone.